Hello, everyone. My name is Jai Vargas. Welcome back to the Latinistas platform. I'm so delighted to be here with you all today. Today, we are talking with Gabriela Carpio. She is going to be talking about the intersectionality between Latina professionals and the Muslim faith and communities. I'm super excited about this because I've known Gabriela for a couple of years. We met through the Latinista network in New York City, and it was quite interesting. I actually didn't really understand her background and her faith and how she came to grow up in it as a professional. So today's conversation is going to be really, really focused around inclusion, diversity, and understanding what the Latino Muslim faith really means. And we'll also be talking to her about the group that she formed called Esencia de Mujer. I'm going to tell you a little bit about Gabriela, and then she's already on screen and she'll tell you a little bit more about herself. Gabriela is a customer success manager at WorkRails, where she builds relationships with her clients to help excel in their business. Before COVID-19, Gabriela was organizing free coding workshops at Facebook, Twitter, ClassPass, Google, and many other tech startup companies, specifically for underrepresented minority groups at Code Bar, the New York chapter. Gabriela is one of the organizers of Esencia de Mujer. She, along with other sisters, formed Esencia de Mujer as a safe space group for all types of Latina Muslims. When we talk about intersectionality, we talk about different aspects of your identity. Most people assume that most Latinos are Catholic. And so today I really am excited about this conversation because since I met Gabriela and since she makes me more aware of how many Latino Muslims there are in the community, I've sort of started gravitating or being more in tuned or aware of all of the ones in the workplace or in my community. And so, Gabriela, welcome back to the Latinista. We are so delighted to have you so that we can learn about you, your community, how we can support you, and how all Latinas are really here to develop one another, whether it's through family, through their career, through anything personal and professionally. So, Gabriela, tell us a little bit about yourself, where you were born, where you grew up, your background, and anything else that you'd like to share.
No, thank you so much, Jai. This is a very special moment for me. I mean, I've been a member of the Latinistas since 2015, since I moved to New York. So for me, it's have been here and talking about my faith and how much the Latino Muslim community is doing here in the U.S. It's really an honor for me. So thank you for inviting me and for being here. Yes, I will have to share a little bit about my background. So I was born in Peru. I came here at the age of 19. I immediately enrolled into school because that's the first thing as an immigrant child, kid you should do. I went to Ramapa College. I was in Ramapa College and I started learning about Islam. I was in school. I was signing up for international affairs. And I remember I had to do a concentration, in Middle East studies and Latin American studies since I was very interested in both. During that time, I remember that I had a couple encounters with friends that were Muslim, so that's how I came into Islam. I also spent a year in Ghana as a volunteer. So that actually helped me see things through in a very different perspective and not and change also my views, as well as challenge a couple views that I had when I was young. So yeah, that's how I came, into the US. Then of course now I work in tech. I realized that the nonprofit space wasn't the place for me. So I decided to take some coding classes. When I was joining the Latinistas group, I was able to get mentored by a couple of friends like Iris Otano, Ivana, you and others that were helping me to, get to the next ladder, get into more interviews, meet other people from other, backgrounds or spaces and fields that, perhaps, they can help me. So all those networking events did help me. So thank you so much for having me today.
Oh, thank you so much for being here. You know, the Latinista community, for those of you who are watching, was started 9 years ago exactly for that purpose, to be able to connect Latina professionals and women of color so that they can help one another in their careers, in mentorship, in negotiating salary, in giving tips about interviewing, or how to come across as your most authentic self on LinkedIn. And so, Gabriela, you actually started a group called Esencia de Mujer. Tell us a little bit about that group and when it started, and really what's at the core of it. What do you do within that group?
Sure, yes. So Esencia de Mujer is a space, a safe space for all Latina Muslims. Latina Muslims, when they come into Islam, they don't come in one form per se. You know, some of them come through their friends, some of them come through their loved ones, some of them come through, just bumping into Islam with when they are going to school. And it's very difficult to to bring them together. They pop up like popcorn. It's not like they're in Jackson Heights or in Astoria that they show up. So we wanted to create a space where everyone can embrace each other, because people, as you can see in Christianity, let's say there are different school of thoughts of, whether people are Catholic, some of them are evangelical, some of them are Baptist. We wanted to have a space where, okay, we are not going to talk about our differences. We're going to focus here on our similarities. What do we have in common, and how can we help each other? Because if we start focusing on our differences, we are not going to support each other. We are also a minority within a minority. How are we going to get help? How are we going to get resources? How are we going to help the next person get next to the next ladder? So that's why we wanted to create this space, so we can talk about anything, not just simply things that are religious, that are important to us, but things that impact us. For example, how to invest, or how to do financial planning, how to talk about healthy relationships, things that perhaps are taboo in our community, in both, I would say, in both communities. Let's talk about those things and let's help each other, because this community obviously will keep growing, and the big number of people that convert to Islam are Latinos, and even more so Latina Muslims. So there's the ratio is between like 30 to 70. So 70% of Latina Muslims are like the biggest number that we see right now.
Wow, that's incredible. And so, when we talk about Islam, share with us a little bit about perhaps the differences between that faith and culture and religion versus others, and what is the biggest difference?
Yeah, so believe it or not, Judaism and Islam are very have a lot in common. A lot of things that we do, and even the words that we use, are very, very common. Uh, the only difference that we have, I would say, is how the prophet. There's just one prophet in common that we don't share with Judaism. Now, with Christianity, it's different, because in Christianity we have the Trinity, and in Islam and Judaism there's only the belief of one God, and that's it. Like, the creator cannot be the creation. There's nothing bigger than God. When I mean big, I don't mean just simply like the sun. I mean like bigger than the universe, bigger than anything else. So that's the main difference. Like what we call tashwit, the belief of just one God. There's nothing else, or like intermediary between us and God.
Hmm. And talk to us a little bit about the culture. How do you practice your faith? How often? What is it that you pray? How do you come into communion with other Latina Muslims or others in the Islam faith?
So we do have, a set of rules that, for example, in terms of like our diet, how we eat, that will be, I'm going to give you an example. For example, how an animal is slaughtered, what they eat. It's very important for us, when the content of the food doesn't have alcohol. That's super important for us, no consumption of alcohol. Make sure that it comes from a clean source, that it isn't oppressing people. That's clear values that we all share in common. When it comes to, let's say, dressing, we dress modestly, and again, this is like very different views that people may have. What for me may be modest may not be modest for another person, another sister in this case. Some of them may be more conservative than me, and they may use the veil, or they may use a turban per se, because for them their level of modesty has to mean, it means something different, and they don't want to. The main reason why they will dress that way is because they don't want to be seen for how they look, but for how they are.
Oh, that's beautiful. I love the way that you put that. Tell us a little bit more about some of the veil, the hijab, because I feel like there are misconceptions about that dress and oppression. Tell us a little bit about why some Latina Muslims do wear the veil or the hijab and why some do not.
Yeah, well, the hijab is something that is obviously command to us. Now, how people practice is obviously different for different reasons. When it comes to the hijab, there are many sisters that prefer not to wear it, because unfortunately there's a lot of isolation and hostility against Muslims after 9/11. It has been really, really hard for someone to. I even heard sisters complaining, like, I don't want to wear the veil anymore. They're calling me Arab, and I'm not an Arab, or they call her, Arab wannabe, or things like that. They're really hurtful to them, and for other sisters, they are like, I'm gonna stop wearing, because if I start wearing it, they're not gonna hire me, because every time I wear a veil, they will just simply not hire me. They will see me as different, or they will question me, like, why my last name doesn't sound like an Arab last name. It sounds
Mhm.
Hispanic. And they start to wonder, am I like a nun or something? And they don't like to give explanations, because it opens a Pandora box. As what's the intention of asking these questions? Like, is it really a workplace supposed to ask you this question about your faith? Definitely not. But definitely you see that that's the point where a lot of employers are using this. They're not saying, but they are using it as a way to not hire, because they find it very controversial.
Yes, which is fascinating that you brought that up because I haven't seen many professionals, especially women, wear the hijab in corporate America, much less Latina Muslims. What do you think that we can do when it comes to learning, speaking out about wearing the veil or the hijab or making others feel more comfortable? You know,
Well,
it's so difficult.
yeah, it goes back with the recent articles actually I was reading about, where they were prohibiting African American men wearing dreads,
Yes.
right? Like, where this was prohibited. And but this is exactly what I could use this as an example. Is just what's happening to a lot of Muslim women. A lot of them have stopped wearing it because of that. A lot of women, even the who are African American, have straightened their hair just because it's not acceptable to have curly hair. And those are the things that I think corporate America needs to learn. When we talk about diversity and inclusion, we truly need to walk, not just simply talk. And if we truly want to attract diversity, we need to embrace those changes.
Yeah, and I feel like the conversation needs to be elevated and had more frequently and often. Because of Black Lives Matter and the murder of George Floyd last year, those Black issues under this entirely huge umbrella have come to the forefront. But when it comes to Islam and Muslims and the prejudice and the bias against them, that is barely talked about in corporate America, barely talked about in diversity. I've been doing diversity for 15 years, and only once in my life did I actually see a Persian and Islam group when it comes to an employee resource group in corporate America. And I was elated, surprised, curious, questioning. I couldn't believe it. And I feel like that has to be a little bit more prevalent so that we can start making this conversation easier. I feel like a lot of people are embarrassed to ask, they don't want to offend, they don't understand it, and there just isn't enough information out there where it's accessible, where you can say, wow, let me learn about this. This is exactly why we're having this conversation, because someone like me who's been in diversity for 15 years doesn't know much about Islam or the Latina Muslims. And so when you were sharing your story, I was like, this is fascinating. more people should know about this, and we should also train individuals in HR and recruiting so that they can feel comfortable asking questions, but not, offending or not prying too much. And also, obviously, if it's faith based, would you ask someone, "Oh, are you Jewish? Are you Catholic? How is that going to, impact my work here?" Why would you ask?
Hmm. Hmm.
I feel like those things that you see visibly, like the hijab, make people assume that you can't do certain parts of the job, maybe because of your faith, and we just don't know.
Yeah, and I think that unfortunately there's a lot of lack of cultural awareness. I have friends, like I have this good friend that I have. She's from Colombia, and the other one is from Puerto Rico, and they're super outgoing. Like they hug me, they hug my husband, and she's a much older, lady, and sister, and like almost like a mom to me. So that it would be completely different in another culture that's probably like South Asian or Arab that may be conservative. They assume that just because she wears the veil, she may be conservative or she's not outspoken. But I could tell you, those women speak even better than me.
That's incredible. That's incredible. I feel like I want to be responsible for pushing forward this conversation even more, and even maybe creating some sort of an article. Maybe this conversation can go on LinkedIn with like an infographic that just shares with people. You don't have to be afraid to ask these questions, right? And this is also not impacting or affecting someone's work. If it was, we'd let you know, obviously. But this is so fascinating. So I'm sure many people are probably asking, you touched a little bit on the food aspect. My favorite food is actually Peruvian food. Oh my goodness. I love ceviche. I love chaufa. I love everything Peruvian food. Is there accessibility when it comes to Peruvian, Latino food, but also in the Muslim community?
No, so that's is one of the biggest misconceptions. So a lot of times, and this is something that happens very often, and we see this coming a lot from the Muslim community. Unfortunately, people who live in isolated communities where they haven't been exposed to the Latino culture, they have an assumption that Latino food is just pork and alcohol. But if you think about it truly, like in my case, I can only speak for Peruvian food. I don't know much about Dominican or Puerto Rican food, but in Peruvian food, like most of our food is based on fish. And
Yeah.
if it's not fish, it's chicken. And it doesn't matter if we are using, you, of course, there are people that use pork, but it's not most of the cases
Mhm.
because we are have been influenced by a lot of culture. So we have this like fusion food type of thing. So no, in my food, I have always been very proud about my food and my culture when it comes to that. Even when I got married, I made sure like this is gonna be the dish you're gonna eat every day because I'm not making other food,
I
you
love
know.
that.
So yes, it was very crucial to me for to make sure of that. Even my parents, when I converted to Islam, they kept telling me like you're Hispanic, and I think one of the reasons why is because they've kind of felt that maybe our daughter is becoming Arab, and I was
Mhm.
like, no, daddy and mom, like I'm still Peruvian. I'm still
Yeah.
Hispanic. I'm still Muslim. Muslim is just my Islam is just my faith.
Mhm.
This is a completely different aspect of my life. Yes, there's a couple of things and rules that I follow, but doesn't change the whole aspect of my food and my culture. Of course, I can dress in colors. I can dress in in my customs that are very traditional Peruvian, but and my food as well. I can embrace it, but of course, I don't consume alcohol. I don't consume pork. I have certain guidelines how I interact with people. Obviously, I'm reminded to be honest. I'm reminded to have good intentions in whatever I do, and that's a good character. If anything, it's nothing negative.
I love that. I feel like so many people don't understand much about the Islam faith and what it's really rooted in. And so that's phenomenal. Tell me a little bit more about how your parents reacted. How did you tell them? How old were you? Did they freak out, or were they like, "Oh, this is interesting. Tell us more."
So I was in, I think, my second year, going to my third year of school, And my parents, I remember that when I told first my dad, because in my heart I was thinking like, you know what, if I tell this to my parents, I mean, I'm not doing anything negative. It's not like I'm consuming drugs or doing something wrong. You know what I mean? So I'm gonna tell them, And I was expecting, I was ready for everything, whether it's bad or good reaction. So my parents were like, no, everything but not this. At the very beginning, it was very, very hard for them. They have all their lives being Christian, and to have a daughter that in their minds, for them, they think that she's going to be working for Al Qaeda, or going to detonate herself, and call for a holy war or something. At the very beginning for me was hurtful to hear that from them, but then I realized that it's their ignorance. So now, as a Latina Muslim, I have to educate them and let them see who Gabriela is, and, as a daughter, as a Muslim, and also as Latina, that I'm not losing my roots just because I converted to Islam. I'm still Peruvian. I still embrace my traditions. Even more with more reasons I have to do that, because Islam also allows us and even says inside the Quran that we made you into different, nations, and, in different people for a reason to come together. So this is the main reason why I will even tell my parents now that they see me and many years have passed. Now they are like, oh, they are much at ease, that at the very beginning, when they were assuming that all of a sudden I was going to change my food and everything was going to be like radical.
Oh my goodness. I cannot imagine, and I think obviously that stems from what we see in the media, from our ignorance, from not taking the time to really learn the Quran or understand the Islam faith. That's beautiful that they were able to come around and just be assured that you are still Gabriela, you are still Peruvian, you are still a loving, nurturing individual. You just have stronger, deeper beliefs and roots, which is incredible. What else can you tell me about the Latino Muslims in that community? How do Mexican, Peruvian, Puerto Rican, Colombian, Dominican Muslims fit into the more general Muslim population? Are they embraced, or does that Muslim community say, you are a Latino, you're confused, what are you doing here? Or are they like, hey, let's party?
That's very interesting that you mentioned it. There's a lot of aspects I could talk about this forever, because that's one of the main reasons why we did this platform of Esencia and Mujer, because there wasn't a spaces for us to be ourselves. And again, when, just as much as we have received backlash from our own Latino families, we also have received, and we have to acknowledge, we have received backlash as well from the mainstream Muslim communities. And mostly also again due to ignorance, because the assumption of what the Latinos are, the community is in general. I have met friends who are Muslims and they're completely ignorant about Latinos, and the first thing they think about me is like I eat pork and alcohol, that is all about my food is about, which is completely ignorant. Or they assume that that women don't dress modestly, or there's just certain women do. And I'm like, no, you can actually meet religious groups that do dress modestly and don't drink alcohol and don't do this and that. And that's just the assumption because of what they see in the media about Latinos. It's like we are in this constant battle of like receiving this from both sides. And again, this comes from a lot of ignorance. It also comes from us having this intersectional identity, to help those people to understand that, what, those things that you're mentioning about us is completely ignorant, and let me tell you why, and this is the reason why, so and so now that we have come with this group of Latina Muslims, when we do events, when we talk about things that are important for us, or even how we dress, everything among ourselves, that is so much easier to do it among women, you know we try to be together for the main reason, to educate others, and also to let others understand that Latinos are not like you're thinking, and Muslims are not like the way you think. So it's like we work in both sides.
That's incredible. I really appreciated that you said that, because in my mind, I felt like the mainstream Muslim community would say, wow, wonderful. We have more people believing in Islam. Come on over. This is the way. So it's interesting that you actually mentioned that Latino Muslims are like a double minority, right?
Yeah, yes, the minority, and it's difficult. So a lot of times you're going to find, and this is something that we face very often, is that when we come Latinos, as first time immigrants in the US, we go through a process of acculturation where we have to fit in to be American.
Hmm.
Now, Latino Muslims have to go through a double process because we have to not only fit in the United States to the the mainstream society that we live in, but we also have to fit in the society, in the community that we are now interacting with, and that's the Muslim community. So a lot of times what happens, and you can see this more in bigger like degree, I would say, is when you see people who the culture where they come from is not really strong. So for example, some people when they come into Islam and their maybe Latino identity is not as strong, when they come into Islam, they become too Arabized or too Pakistanized. And it's not because that's the intended intention, it's just unintentional because they don't know where to grab it from. What's their culture? Because colonialism has hit us all in Latin America. Same thing, Dominican Republic and Peru. And when we come now into this community where this majority of them probably speak Arabic or the majority of them speak Urdu, we are like, oh, I have to also learn this language, or I also have to dress the way they dress. And it's unintended because they are trying so hard to fit in. But now having a community or a space where all Latinos can be invited, it just feels so much relaxed because it's like, oh, I don't have to try so hard, you know?
Yeah, and I'm sure it feels good to be able to connect with other Latinas that understand your food, your culture, your music, your family, your countries, your language. That must feel so good. Tell me a little bit about the rituals that you have, praying. Tell me a little bit more about that. How often do you do it amongst yourselves? How does that come about?
Yeah. So for us, all Muslims, we are prescribed to pray 5 times a day. That's mandatory. Now, I can only speak for myself. I'm not good at that yet,
Wow,
and that's just the nature of being honest.
that is a lot.
uh, but there's a lot of people that do follow this strictly, and kudos to them who do. And it's very hard working and doing practice your faith at the same time. But for some others, they have found comfort in doing it after work, or making up for that, because you in Islam you do have the option to make up for your prayers. So yeah, and alhamdulillah has, like we said, praise be to God, we have been very very we have been trying our best as Latino Muslims to keep that in us. I have friends that until now, they're still trying to learn Arabic. Arabic is the language which the Quran was prescribed, was written. We have sisters that still haven't been able to learn Arabic, but they read the Quran in Spanish because that's the connection where they have, or in English because that's the connection where they can read and understand when they do the prayers, when they read the Quran. And it's so much better when you learn this directly from other Latina Muslims. Like I have a friend who she's actually Dominican, and she actually was teaching us last Ramadan, which was the month that we fast, to learn how to read in Arabic, just to read, just to read, because there's a lot of benefit on that. So I was just so happy to find someone who just looks like me
Mm.
and teach me Arabic and just make me feel comfortable while making mistakes.
Oh my goodness. And have you tried to learn Arabic or do you read the Quran in Spanish?
I mean, until now, to be honest, I read the Quran in Spanish, but I can read a couple of things in Arabic. I can read a couple of things in Arabic. Thank for the teacher, the instructor that we had that taught us. But yeah, I can.
Fascinating. I'm sure there's probably so many courses online, especially now during COVID, where people are saying, oh, this is an opportunity and a service that I can offer so that Latina Muslims can learn Arabic or anyone can learn Arabic or how to read the Quran.
Yes, I agree. I agree. Yeah. So the basic things about that is just learning the alphabet and
Mhm.
pronouncing it, which is the hardest thing to do. I mean, for some Latinos, it's easy, I would say. For some Latinos, it's easy, but for some others, it takes some time.
Wow. And about how many Latinas or women are part of your Esencia de Mujer? Is it only in New York? Are there chapters anywhere else? How many women have you been able to find?
Every day we find, every week we find someone new, or if it's not someone new, it's someone that we have reconnected. So basically most of our events are done in New York because we feel that it's the center, where people from Washington DC, from Boston, from other places can come, from even from New Jersey as well. So it has mostly been in New York, but we do connect with people, with sisters that live in other states. If someone travels, even with a lot of sisters in Latin America too. So if someone travels, okay, we have a sister that it's in Brazil, we have a sister that's in Dubai, we have a sister, so we connect, because we want to make sure that this community keeps growing and everyone gets connected.
Absolutely. That's phenomenal. And where do you usually convene? Is it a restaurant or a different location in New York?
Yes, so typically when we reconvene is at either people's houses, or when we initiated first, our first event was at ICNYU, which is the Islamic Center of New York University. The
Hmm.
first event that we had around like 33 people.
Wow.
The number of Latina Muslims, I would say in New York should be around 100. That's so far I know. That's so far I know. And they could be more because every day, like I said, I keep meeting new people every week. Like somebody sends a message on Instagram. Here I am. I'm in New York, or even some people that are coming to visit New York. They're like, "Oh, we want to participate in one of the events," based on what they have followed us, on Instagram or through word of mouth. And yeah, the number keeps growing. My goal is not so much about the growing the numbers, but really connecting, making sure that, okay, everyone knows someone who they can talk to, they can feel comfortable, they can feel safe, because that's the most important at Esencia de Mujer.
And I'm actually going to look for your Instagram handle so that I can drop it into the chat box so that everyone can follow you. Tell me a little bit more about maybe some of the upcoming events or programs or how we watching, supporting can help you in this community.
Yeah, so you can definitely follow us on Facebook or Instagram at Esencia de Mujer, altogether NYC. Also, if you want to do an event with us, it doesn't matter what event could be. We look to always meet people, even who are not Latino Muslims, who perhaps maybe want to talk about meeting us. A lot of the times we get a lot of reach outs, people who are photographers, journalists who want to speak with us or get to meet us or interested about Islam or learning about Islam or learning about the Latino Muslim community. Feel free to send us a message. Also, what's the best way that we can empower other Latina Muslims is just one of the things that I was just talking with one of my friends was being having the intention. I think like when we talk about diversity and inclusion, I think it has become kind of like preaching to the choir, where a lot of the things that we talk about are not being done. So if you know a Latina Muslim, don't judge her for her embracing Islam, but help her and see the commonalities that you have with her, with that person, and bring them into the space where they can feel safe. Because now that in the times that we live right now, there's a lot of hostility against Muslims, and we as fellow Latinas have to support other Latina Muslims, no matter how different we may believe.
I love that. That's incredible. Well, you can definitely count on the Latinista to support you. Anything that you need, whether it's a space, a community, a platform, LinkedIn connections, anything, you can count on me. It was so interesting because the other day I was sitting down with a client of mine out of Long Beach, California. And when she was introducing herself, I obviously saw that she was wearing a hijab and she was like, "Oh, yo soy mexicana." And I was like, "Oh my goodness. Oh my goodness. I'm so excited. I'm so excited. I have to connect with Gabriela." And that's the email connection that I sent you the other day for one of my clients. Um, it's just so
Wow.
beautiful. And I think it's a conversation that needs to be shared more. I'm going to make it my responsibility to bring this up during Hispanic Heritage Month, because it's important to start bringing in that intersectionality, because we are still very much Latino, and you can be Muslim, Latina, and Latino.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely, absolutely. It's so important to bring that up because I think that also um, I think like there's a lot of people that can benefit from this. There's a lot of things that, like I said, so much education that can happen vice versa, to the Muslim community, to the Latina community, and so much that this can bring in and extend to. That if we don't learn to accept people for who we are, what we embrace, differences and everything. It's about inclusion. It's time to do that.
Absolutely. You said it perfectly. Thank you so much. I'm going to share all of your information on our Latinista Instagram, our Facebook, as well as our LinkedIn, so that everybody can connect with you. If they have someone to connect you with, part of the Latina Muslim community, we want to make that happen. And it's going to be my personal responsibility to have this conversation more often so that we can just start being more inclusive, opening our minds and asking questions without thinking that we are offending, right? This is what it's all
Yeah.
about, just showing grace and getting to know one another a little bit deeper so that we don't have to be afraid of really who we are.
Absolutely. No, thank you, Jai. And definitely, I think there's going to be a lot of Latinas, Muslims that are going to come out from out there. I've seen every time in Ramadan, I always see someone Latina coming out in, embracing Islam. And for me, it's just beautiful to see that diversity is growing.
I love it. Well, thank you again, Gabriela. Muchísimas gracias. You were wonderful. I appreciate your time and your energy, and I can't wait to finally see you in person one of these days.
Yeah, inshallah, God willing. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Jai. It's been a
Thank
pleasure
you.
working with you. Take
Inshallah.
care. Bye. Bye.
Nos vemos.